Okay, we've made it to episode 2 of Creative Corner. I'm here with Zach and Ross today for a little bit of a brief for you guys about what Creative Corner is and what it aims to do. It aims to bridge the gap between leaving that area of study, whether that be A-levels, college or university, and bridge that gap between leaving those and getting a first job in the creative industry. I've got two great guests here, my best friends, Zach and Ross. You just want to introduce yourselves, guys, and what you do currently?
Hi. So I'm Zach, so I'm a graphic designer. I went to the same university as these two, that's where we all met. And I specialize in branding, layout, and photography. And over that time, I've kind of lent heavily into marketing and photography, and that's kind of what I do right now.
Cool. I'm Ross. I am a junior graphic designer at a Cheltenham-based design agency called Third Floor. We specialize in lifestyle brands and I guess small startups, you could say. But yeah, I guess lifestyle is quite a broad term, so anything that fits under that really. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So the first question that I like to kick off things with is your stories, where you started to where you are now. Zach, if you just want to go ahead and explain that process. Were there any moments along the way where you sort of surprised yourself, pivoted, go into as much or as little detail as you can?
Sure. So I was always creative when I was young. That all of my siblings were as well, and I daydreamed all the time, and always, I mean, like most little boys are, I was really into like kind of cool cars and you know, and aircraft and stuff like that. So I was actually firstly drawn into product design. I want to go into aviation or automotive industry to design the form and the kind of bodywork of cars actually first. That passion as a young child kind of grew, and it went into generalized product design, where for quite a few years I really wanted to design furniture, you know, famous chairs and whatnot, and wanted to look back and see if I'd made something physical. But I took quite a few A-levels in all coursework subjects. So that was product design, music technology, and graphic design. And that's because I was interested in all of them. I couldn't really decide what to do, and I was warned not to. They said, you know, that's too much. You know, pick maybe one or two coursework subjects. So I was kind of like pushed away from doing fully, you know, going into a fully creative direction. But you know, I ignored the advice and took it all. Did terribly actually in A-levels. But I found that I wasn't just into all those creative subjects, but I found that I was actually really good at graphic design, and I got more passionate as the time went on. I think a big part of that was having a good teacher in my A-levels. That made a massive difference to my approach to design. So I finished university with finished A-levels with not very good grades, but I had a good enough portfolio and enough work experience outside of school hours to get me into my first choice, which was Worcester University. And you know, stayed in there, and it was the course we all did was a multidisciplinary design course, so we actually did a lot of different areas in design, and I really got into photography at that time. And eventually that became a hobby, and I've done a few little freelance briefs on the side, and it's something I still do to the day. But towards the end of my degree, I kind of fell out of love with graphics, honestly. I was kind of sick of being told what to design. I think I missed the kind of pure creativity of, hey, here's a visual I've created and I love it. Instead it was all about, here's a need and you have to deliver it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time that wasn't really why I went into design. And that's kind of carried forward a little bit. After university, I actually went into the specialty coffee industry, because that was something I always did on the side. I was always into kind of coffee, and so I worked in the roasting industry for about a year. They did have a non-profit where we used to go into schools and teach kids about design and good packaging, and communicating things like ethical agriculture. And it was there where I kind of rekindled my love for design. I think that was because I was designing for something I thought was either altruistic going into schools, or I was designing about coffee. So it was an interest of mine. Then the kind of coronavirus pandemic started around March. So that kind of hit the nail in the coffin at that job. And since then, I've just been doing some freelance graphic design. And currently, I work as a marketing manager for a company in Wales who sells educational software. A lot of that is kind of social media based, but also we're going to move into kind of print advertising and whatnot. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, so I think obviously there's a lot of sort of pivots and changes within that story there. Was there ever a time where, obviously you mentioned product design in the beginning, is there a time where product design sort of fell off the grid a little bit? Is that something that you would go into again? Is that, at what stage is that sort of like within your life right now?
So it's always going to be an interest. I think since the age of like 16, 17, I've read design.com, the online magazine about design architecture, pretty much daily. I love the kind of community around design as a whole, not just graphic design. But it was around about my A levels where I saw my strengths in graphics, and I wasn't very good at like making physical products. The label wasn't a problem, but it was kind of like the fit and finish. I was significantly better at the conceptual part of product design. But I understand quite a lot of that industry right now is really hard to get into. And you kind of, from my friends who are product designers, it seems very slim picking. And you kind of get veered in certain directions of where jobs are available rather than what you want to do. So I haven't really picked up the interest to go back into education for it or anything like that. I'm interested in it, but it kind of died out in A levels for me.
Yeah, interesting that you bring up this. You were better at the sketching part than the actual physical part, because something that I've learned more recently is that there are different elements in design. So you say something like architecture and the design of a building, and you can look at, let's say, a poster design perhaps, and you can use elements of what they use in architecture in terms of spacing, layout, composition, and use that on a poster, and it will have that same effect within the poster.
Yeah,
do you find that using bits of product design, bits of typography have helped you in your graphic design work? Is that something that overlaps somehow?
I think more so in my journey with photography. It was kind of taking a fixed space, which is your environment, or let's say your product you're going to shoot with your camera, and because it's kind of a fixed element, you have to work around it. And there's only a few things you can do to alter that. So whether that's manipulation by putting things in front or shooting your camera through something, or it's kind of reframing it literally by, for example, compositionally. My whole kind of approach to graphic design changed when I did photography, because you kind of approach a lot of photography areas with a set intention in mind. So, for example, I'm doing architectural photography, so I know roughly what lens I'm going to go in with. I know the angles I have to kind of shoot. I have to usually shoot upwards into it, and so how can I, use a kind of like how can I distort that, break the rules a little bit, and that kind of having to frame it and move an object in the picture changed the way I did graphic design, in the sense that I'd go in and see all these elements on the page. So let's say I'm doing a kind of newspaper layout. It would kind of make me want to, create leading lines and, and use all sorts of different effects to kind of tilt perspective. So that's, I said, the majority of where that influence and that kind of like outsider design areas have kind of influenced my graphic design. But actually, product design wise, not really. I think that for me anyway, the way I had them in my mind, they were just so separate. So they've never really bridged.
I think it's weird, isn't it, how you have all these different design elements. You have, interior design, you have photography, you have graphic design, you have illustration, and some will be completely separate and have completely different ways around things. And then you'll have things that will overlap weirdly. There's a lot of things about interior design and also game design because if you're designing a game, perhaps you're designing an interior of a game, perhaps you're designing an object. A lot of that is to do with perspective and how you look at something, what lighting effects are going to happen on it.
Yeah, it's the expectations as well, right?
Yeah.
So if you're creating an environment in a game world and you're creating a kitchen, it has to look like a kitchen, because the more if we fade into the background, the more familiar it will be. So when you're walking through in a game, and if you don't pay any mind to the kitchen, it's probably because it looked like a kitchen. It was very convincing. Nothing stood out to make you go, "Hey, that looks weird." And I think if you're a designer, well, especially if you're a creative person in general, I think you can, the lines blur a little bit in terms of, if you're a graphic designer, well, you could probably lean in towards illustration. If you're a fine artist, you could probably also do the same and whatnot. I think as a creative person, you will always find ways to approach different fields in the industries. But I always kept them separate. I've always thought it would be nice to incorporate my past in music with graphic design, but it's something I've never really explored quite yet.
Well, there's always a chance for that to happen. I think it's just waiting for that opportunity to work on a project where it makes itself known. Speaking of making themselves known, it's Ross Morgan. Ross, you just want to go ahead. Obviously, your story might be a little bit more steps to be taken up, because obviously there's a few things that me and Zach both know that the audience don't yet know. So if you just want to go ahead and explain sort of where your creativeness started,
where it began,
and where it is now.
I guess mine probably didn't start in the same way as Zach's did. Mine came from a frustration between the sort of transition from GCSE to A level. So I remember, obviously, you have, like, just before you enter A level, you have the careers advisor come in, and you're being told, like, what subjects you want to take and what do you want to study, and what are you thinking of getting to uni. I think at that age, I didn't have like a clue what I wanted to do. So I knew, I guess, like Zach, from a young age, I was always, I guess, creative, always like loved drawing and stuff like that. So naturally, the careers advisor was like, "Oh, we'll put you in for fine art." And I was like, "Yeah." And I guess, being 16, 17, you sort of look at it with an arrogant tone and think, "Oh yeah, like, I'll just do it." I didn't really care. There wasn't a lot of love and attention there at all. And they were like, "We'll put you in for graphic design as well." And of course, at that age, I had no idea what it was. Never heard of medium before. Never explored it. I was just like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine." So obviously, starting A level, we were quite a small group. The class was probably no bigger than 8, and that was including the teacher. So it was a really small. And in the first year, I didn't get it. Didn't understand anything. Everyone else was picking up these things, and I was asking questions that made me feel stupid because everybody had already had the answers. And that I hated that. And obviously that's probably where the frustration came in. And that led to a curiosity, and then that curiosity sort of evolved and altered into a passion. It was like, right, how much of this subject can I learn? So in the second year, I was like, right, I'm gonna really get my head down, and I'm gonna set myself these goals. And obviously, you graded like A, B, and C, and I was like, I'm gonna come out with like A's in everything, and I'm gonna make sure that happens. So the second year was probably my first year of real hard work. And then obviously everyone's going to uni and they're doing all these UCAS submissions, and I didn't feel I was quite there yet. So there was a course called, it was a foundation course. It basically bridged that gap. So I looked at doing that and specialising in graphic design there as well. So obviously before you start, at the start of the year, they open you up to a load of different mediums, and you do a little bit of everything. And then at the end, in your last term, you do what's called an FMP, so a final major project. So obviously that's when I specialised in design. And again, this passion sort of growing and growing and growing, and it's snowballing, but I'm not quite sure about what I want to do yet. So obviously after foundation, I went to NUA, Norwich University of the Arts, and specialised in you brought it up briefly, but video game design. So design assets, 3D elements, Photoshop as well, paintings. and it was real weird. I couldn't tell you quite why I picked that. It was just something that at the time, I guess, whether I was into video games more so than I am now at that time, that could have played a big influence. And yeah, so I started doing that and hated it. Absolutely hated it. It was a really credible uni. The course was good. It gave a lot of accessibility to lecturers and industry professionals that you wouldn't have got as a normal person. So yeah, the course was great. It just wasn't for me. So after 1 year, I was like, right, I get 4 years of student finance. I don't want to waste those extra 3. So changed courses. Went somewhere a little closer to home. So obviously that's when we all met at Worcester. And yeah, I guess my only regret at Worcester is I wish I'd done the uni experience of staying there and moving away from home.
I offered him.
What's that?
I offered him. I said we should live with each other.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
I wish I'd done that in hindsight. I think looking back, and then I guess, that course was brilliant for so many different reasons. I guess Zach, briefly, what you touched on, the whole you do a load of different aspects of design, and then you can hone in on whatever. That was really good. I think that opened. I wouldn't necessarily say uni was like the deciding factor in getting a job, but the experience certainly brought me a lot of qualities that would have maybe taken me a longer time outside of
we've definitely had this experience, haven't we? Or this discussion of
absolutely.
If you were to go to uni, like if you had the opportunity to do university again, or were going to the university for the first time, like what would you do differently, and would you do it at all? And I think our conclusion within that topic is that the experience that you get from uni and actually like going to university, the opportunities that you get to do, like whether it's like nights out or more the social side of things, or is it a professional side of things where you get to meet people, go to certain events and that sort of thing, is so much more valuable.
I think it's the whole experience, isn't it? Like those whole 3 years, and you do I still find the concept now like such a mad idea. Like you take 18-year-olds from all over the country and you force them into a new place with new people that they've never met before, and you're like, right, I just find that whole idea weird.
Yeah, it is for some, isn't it? Right, like not everyone enjoys it, and I kind of want to. Like, it's worth mentioning that if you can figure out what you want to do, because I knew I wanted to do graphic design since GCSEs. I did it then, and I just knew I wanted to do it. But now I finished my degree, and I'm starting to, I've had all these kind of questions. I've had this time for reflection during the coronavirus pandemic. Like, what do I want to do? Is this what I want to do? And I think that's just being young and in your 20s, where you kind of have that moment where you're like, but if you know what you want to do, university is a really good path to get the qualifications right to where you want to be. But if you're not sure, it will let you know either way, because you either finish your degree and say that was a waste of time, like I did the wrong thing and I want to do this instead, or you'll say yes, that was amazing and that was right for me. So it's a sure way to find out, as long as you have a good time. If you get like meeting new people, and you like going on lights out and stuff, you have a great time, as long as you're willing to take on a debt as well.
I think that was I think I'd probably highlight that a little bit, because there's such a stigma between, do you need to go to uni and study this sort of degree to get where you need to be? Well, like not necessarily, but I couldn't have imagined myself where I was if I didn't have that experience. I think the best thing, I think it gives you the tools to network better.
For sure.
You're exposed to a load of different people. I think my levels of confidence speaking certainly went up through uni.
For sure, right?
Yeah, it did a lot of healthy things. Maybe I can't pinpoint those exactly, but for me, I'd be trying to bridge a bigger gap between how to leave education and get to a job without uni. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's a different conversation. It could be a much bigger one as well.
Right, especially now since the pandemic, well, a lot of universities are staying online. We might see in the future, if we have kids, for example, that our kids will go to university but online. Like there's a completely different way, and that's a whole other thing. But there's also like trade schools, learning and apprenticeship. it's something I almost did. It's especially in England. If you train to be a plumber, you're guaranteed good income. You just straight up guaranteed, because everyone needs a good plumber, right? Everyone needs carpenters and stuff. If you work in graphic design, you don't work in like a kind of local field like a tradesperson, like a tradesman would. Instead, you have to kind of and it's importance of networking because of that is you kind of compete on a national scale, because people move for the jobs. Because they don't necessarily have to if it's a trade. And I've got a friend who's a mechanic, and he's we're the same age, both 22, and he is like set in the sense that no matter where he moves to in the country, he's got that job. It's so easy to walk in and get the job for him. That's how he described it to me. And he doesn't have to worry about competition in the area and whatnot, because there's so few and far between qualified mechanics. And whereas a concern might be current climate is, well, we can work remotely, which means we can work anywhere, so we can apply anywhere. So if you live in Bristol, you're not just competing with graphic designers in Bristol, but people willing to work remotely away from Bristol, and people willing to, and that's ignoring the fact that people are willing to move to Bristol. So it's pretty interesting for that reason. But that would change depending on the course.
It quickly scales up, doesn't it, from competing on a local level to competing on a global level. And when an industry is pretty competitive enough as it is already, all of a sudden you've got, oh, by the way, I'm not in your country, but I feel like I'm going to be the best suited for this, for your agency.
Like I said, creatives can work wherever they want to in the world with internet connection and a really powerful laptop.
Assuming you're not, doing physical media, because if you need a studio for screen printing, you're kind of limited, I guess. But
9 times out of 10, you can do an awful lot from
for sure
on your lap. I guess following on from uni, my last year I interned at a few places, one of which was in London, one of which was in Southampton, and then one of which was in Cheltenham. So 3 altogether. 2 were very different. So the London one was great in terms of its location. Spending a whole week in London, that was really cool. But it was more a statistics-driven agency. There wasn't as much on the design aspect. Again, and then the Southampton one, that one was a little different as well. That was like, if you can imagine, like really kind of, and this is no offense to at all, it was just a really dull, stereotypical office. That had offered nothing that I enjoyed either. Good, because if I hadn't done those 2, I wouldn't have known what I didn't want to go into.
That's the thing. Like, it's important to know what you want, and also as important, if not more important, to know what you don't want as well. So
it's easier to know what you don't like before you find out what you do like in anything.
I'd actually argue that work experience for me in the 3 or 4 places I did it was more of a learning lesson than anything I actually got from uni. Dare I say? I mean, great things from there, but in terms like was said, in terms of knowing for sure, is this what I want to do? Being sat in a business which does it is like a straight up way to find out.
And that's sort of where the third the third agency that I interned with, which is the one I'm at now, that experience was everything I wanted. The team, the studio space, the individuals, more than anything. There was just, I was like, I guess during my 3 weeks there, the craziest thing was like, Jesus Christ, like, you guys are getting paid to do this.
It
just seemed like
wake up every day and do what you love.
And I guess I didn't think some of that perfect it like existed. It sounds kind of, I guess, like cliche, but it was. I was like, wow, this is incredible. I guess that was the longest of the 3 internships. That was only for 3 weeks. And then after uni, obviously we do a degree show. And the degree show, I guess, like I was like, something had come up on the night, so I probably didn't put as much effort into looking for jobs as I should have done beforehand. I should have spent my whole of 3rd year, I think, looking for roles. And then only one thing came from obviously our degree shows. That was Andrew Grant, who were at the time a sort of regional estate agents, and that was as an in-house graphic designer. So stayed there for a little bit, and obviously, well, actually stayed there from, when did I start? August time, I think, end of August, early September. And then obviously that went right around to obviously lockdown, where obviously we all went into were made redundant. So I was left like sort of twiddling my thumbs, like, what do I do? Was lucky enough to know a few people that picked up sort of part-time hours in, you know, hospitality trade and that sort of thing. And then ended up getting a job at a company called Saddleback. Again, as an in-house designer, similar thing. It was, I guess, slower paced. I wasn't really working within a team. So for my first 2 roles out of uni, they both had similarities, which I knew I didn't like. So yeah, I guess and then after, what was it, the first or second week?
The end of the first week.
When I was at Saddleback, before I got the job offer, I was going to intern with Third Floor again in Cheltenham, but because this offer had came up, you know, I had to politely decline. And after sort of 1 or 2 weeks, again, like we were saying, you know what you don't like and what you do like, and Saddleback was great for a load of different reasons, and then also some of the ones that didn't take personal interest. So again, got back in contact with Third Floor, had a few conversations with those guys, and that's where I'm at now. So I've been there for 2 weeks. It feels like I've been there longer, I guess, because the connection's always been stronger or strong. I've kept in the loop, kept in touch, or tried to follow their work and stuff like that. So yeah, but again, like, I've learned more in those 2 weeks than I have in my entire previous roles. So the intensity is quicker, the pace is quicker, and I guess for the first time I'm working amongst a creative team that share knowledge and insight, and that goes for everybody. Like, everybody there is of massive value. So yeah, really good.
Yeah, it's interesting how you speak about your different placements and different experiences you've had, because you're not just speaking about the design work, you're speaking about the office space, the people that you're working with, the environment in which the office is based. Is it based in London? Is it based, outside of the city centre? It's bringing these different factors that probably students won't be thinking about firsthand. It'll just be like, I'll just get a design job. But it's a lot more than that.
Similarity to picking your university choice. It's never just the course, is it? You've got to be happy with the city, the structure, the prospect, the people. It's a much more rounded package.
Yeah, I got accepted into Falmouth University, and I turned it down because it wasn't the right place for me. I mean,
that's what I felt with Norwich.
Yeah, at the time it's supposed to be the best graphic design course in the UK, but I went there and I was like, it's a lot of big talk, and the university looks as good as all the others I applied for. So I was like, why would I go here? It's just far away. So yeah, it really is half the place.
Yeah, I think that comes with a job as well. You've got to have people that you click with and you work really well with. You've got to have an office space that you're excited to get up to or up in the mornings for, because it's like an environment, a cool space to be in.
Do you share the values of the company, and do they align with the values of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what went from my first internship with them last year. I felt myself getting up, so they expect you to be there at 9 to 5, and I wanted to get in for 8 because it was just a really cool place to be. So many different reasons. And although that's kind of different now, I guess, but actually maybe it's not so different. I don't feel much different in the fact that maybe I've got a little bit of I put pressure on myself to deliver.
Right.
But yeah, it still feels the same. It feels like I'm learning at a quicker rate, and it feels like I'm wanted there. I'm not just somebody that's coming in and coming out, because they have so many interns that come in and out the door. And that's, I guess, is why it's a real big privilege as well. I'm incredibly proud to work there, just because I know how many CVs end up on the door, how many students get in contact with, and I know for a small agency the reputation that they carry, and the prospect and the ambition that they've all got. So to be a part of that is something that feels special. Yeah.
Is seeing that sort of like behind the scenes, the amount of CVs come through the door, having experiences with internships and that sort of thing, having seen the behind the scenes and the goings on of that, it made you appreciate where you are right now a little bit more.
Yeah, massively. It's really cool. It is really cool. I guess like sometimes even now, like I'm there like, Jesus, like what qualities do I bring to the table? But, like I think as all creatives self-doubt a little bit. I think like that's very apparent. So yeah, I'm just like, Jesus, like what do I do? Because like for example, I've seen some students that have done like research for a brand or a project or something that have come in and their work has been so thorough and so highly detailed, and I'm like, oh my God, like why didn't they get a job? So yeah, I think
a lot of
it's really, really cool. Really
a lot of
cool.
the companies I've worked with, you'll get, this is both in the hospitality industry, in the specialty coffee industry, and in the design industry. No matter where I've been, there's always been an influx of applications and CVs. And it's not only, oh, is that the right person, but is it the right time for the company? I remember distinctly in the past working for a company where they had an amazing application come through, but they just really couldn't afford at the time to bring anyone else on. Which is actually a good note to mention of how you stayed in touch with Third Floor, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you went there for work experience. It went well, and then you stayed in tabs. You were emailing them for feedback on your design work and stuff, and that's an important point. Is they might have loved you at the first few weeks you went there, and they might have wanted to hire you on the spot, but perhaps it was just bad timing in the year. So actually, you staying in touch led you to that job in a way, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Like I've asked Third for like, what do I bring in? I guess key attributes for them are like work ethic and attitude, and would they fit into the team? So I guess it's like, how we were saying, it's not just the work, it's the environment, it's the space, it's staff, it's all this bigger package. I guess for them, it's the same thing from an employer's point of view. Like, they don't want somebody that can just deliver good work. They want somebody like, they want, what's their personality like? What's their work ethic?
Yeah, you've got to sit next to them for 8 hours a day.
Yeah. Will they ask the necessary, like, will they ask questions? Are they keen to learn? How do they take feedback? And like all these little things, which I'd like to say, like, without it coming across arrogant, like hopefully I do have. I like to think if I didn't, I wouldn't have the role there.
Yeah, you wouldn't be there.
But no, yeah, that's something I really hold dear, I guess. Yeah, cool. Really cool feeling. So yeah, that's pretty much my journey up until now. So I guess it's like now I'm here, I'm like, okay, cool. What is next? And I don't really know what the answer is to that yet.
Yeah, I think that'll make itself apparent, right? Because obviously you've both just told your stories about where things started and where things are now, and you've sort of said, well, it sort of went like this, then this, then this. There was no sort of, all right, there was some directions in there, but in terms of looking forward, you probably at the time you didn't really know where you were ending up. So you might have decided, yes, I want to go to university. You didn't know what university. You had no idea. Do I want to go to university? Do I want to do something else? Like Ross, you did a foundation course before you went over to university first. Yeah,
at any level you were going to be here. At the time I would have
different options, aren't they? For sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Something that I'm going to touch on a little bit here is that, like, through our different journeys and projects that we've worked on, I think we've all probably, like Ross, you probably touched on it a little bit more there, is that we've probably suffered with imposter syndrome a little bit. And like, because you said, like, what is it about me that makes me like be here? Like what have I done to deserve this?
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of tips or like just like thought processes in which you go through, like when that happens? Like, because obviously you do deserve to be there. You've just told us your story, and now we know your story and we know how you got there and the effort that you've put in order to be in that job. Is there any sort of tips for anyone who say, oh, they might not be feeling good enough, or is there anything that you would say to them that you would tell your past self?
I get what in terms of if you're suffering from it, that imposter syndrome. I think I don't think that ever truly goes away. Like it was mentioned to me by somebody like I've a great deal of respect for, that doubt should never be lost. Like you should always have that doubt there because that's going to be your pushing factor to keep going.
Right.
But I wouldn't, like he also said on the flip side that, like, don't let it eat into you so much that it starts to have a negative effect. It should be a positive motivator, like a positive motivator. It should have, it should be there for positive reasons, not negative, or it should be looked at in a positive way. I guess that would be my only sort of thing. I don't think
sort of change the mindset in which you look at it and the way you think about that.
Yeah, I guess we're not ever really satisfied. I don't think that'll ever. I don't really know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, Zach, I don't. You could probably weigh in on this.
Yeah, there's a few ways you can look at imposter syndrome, and I think it depends on your experience and your personality traits, how you take it. There's not necessarily like a right or wrong answer to it. So you could see imposter syndrome as a reflection of anxiety and like negative mental chatter, but it might not be, the complete picture. So this constant fear of, I'm not good enough to be here. Why am I here? I feel like I need to constantly work my ass off to demonstrate if I'm here. That's because just the nature of humanity is you tend to always dwell on the negative things because memory serves you as a learning platform. So when you fall down a hole, you remember that terrible time so that you don't fall down the same hole again. With an imposter syndrome, it's a similar kind of notion of, I need to be like somewhat self-aware that I don't feel quite like I've earned this place, so no one else comes behind you and and outdoes you and takes your job. So it's kind of like this kind of back burner, and like Ross said, it can be a positive reinforcement. It keeps you on your toes, keeps you going, it keeps you demonstrating your skill set, because if you can frame it this way, you say, I am actually scared that I don't feel like I'm good enough to be part of this team. Well, that's an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you are. That gives you a platform to be like, okay, I'm actually scared, but I'm going to use that and take it forward and say, well, what could happen if I was good enough for this team? And let me see if I can try and do that and produce work what I'm happy enough with. And it's finding that balance with the mental chatter in your head, because the flip side is, if you don't see that as an opportunity and a flame under you to keep you going, then you're going to constantly be reflecting on how you're not good enough. And this is something definitely I felt in a previous role before, is I've made a mistake, I don't feel like I'm good enough, and I can't make another mistake because I need to make sure I've got job security, etc., and because I should be good enough to be to work here, etc. But if you keep dwelling on those mistakes, you're going to make more mistakes because you're not focused. And the key for that is not to ignore it. You have to acknowledge that you're feeling the imposter syndrome, and it's something actually the company is part and responsible to talk you with. Like Ross mentioned, he went to his line manager and his lead creative to say, hey, I feel somewhat out of place. I feel like I almost don't deserve this, and why me type of thing as well.
Sorry, to intervene. They said that sort of relates to that really well as well, as they said it's like, it's not your job to come in and be the agency. It's our job to bring you in and make our job is failed if we don't get you up to speed.
Yeah, you're a catalyst of potential, and we're all still really young. So, in fact, maybe the imposter syndrome you're feeling is 100% correct, and maybe you aren't on the level of everyone else, and you probably won't be. But that's because you're a junior designer. That's because it's your first week or whatever. It's like, we shouldn't expect to be amazing out of the gate. What we should expect of ourselves is to do our best and represent who we are as best as we can and what we could be. And then, like Ross said, they need to aid in taking you there. So if anyone's suffering from imposter syndrome, it's something you need to Yeah, fully acknowledge. And
It's
if
never
it's
who you are, is it? It's how good you want to be.
yeah, and talk to your line, your manager, and be like, hey, I'm actually a little bit worried, and this is bothering me, and it's something they might be like, actually, you bring this, you bring that, you bring that, and you bring that, and you might have a lot of skill sets you never even realized, but I've keep you there. So yeah, it's a frame, it's a the way you frame it.
So that idea
with people our age, the fear of failure is something that is quite apparent.
Massively.
Maybe that could be linked, lightly to social media or strongly, depending on how you looked at it. But I think that whole idea of being shown that this is the ideal height of life, people are afraid of making those mistakes that were actually teaching the biggest lessons.
Yeah,
I think maybe why it's more apparent in people our age nowadays.
I shared a website with you both recently. I don't know if you remember, where at the top of the navigation, so it's home, about, what we do, and the next one was our mistakes. And I think a big part is, like you mentioned, to media is on people's portfolio, it's only their best work. People's CV, it's only the best things they've done. Dating apps, it's only your best self. Instagram, it's only your best pictures. Twitter, it's only your wisest of thoughts and whatnot. So yeah, of course, it's a platform. We feel like we've got platforms to fall off of and to fail because there isn't enough discussion of what we do wrong and how we've learned from it.
Yeah, I think there should be much
and if anything, every single hiccup like that in your life is just an opportunity to help someone else. So I think more big leaders are getting onto that idea. So hopefully a positive trend, for sure.
Definitely. Coming back to what you said, Zach, about imposter syndrome and seeing that as sort of seeing it as an opportunity to do better, or like to be like, okay, so what happens?
Prove your worth.
To prove your worth. It reminds me of a quote that we all went to Birmingham Design Festival last year. Was it last year?
Yeah.
Was it last year?
About a year and a half ago.
Yeah, something like that. And we watched D & Co do a talk on some of the projects that they're working on. And they sort of end off the talk talking about actually getting stuff done. And the simple quote was, what would you do if you weren't afraid of what other people thought?
Yeah.
It's just sort of like sums that up so nicely, because it's just like, who is going to care? Like, and are you the only person that's going to be caring enough for it to make a difference?
I think that's so true of freelancers as well. If you're a creative and a lot of your projects are self-initiated, it has to be, what do I want to do, and what do I think I could do if I put my mind to it, rather than what would people think if they saw this. There's one ceramicist, Otto Holland, I think her name was, in Herefordshire, and her work is amazing. She just stands out and does whatever she wants with ceramics. She has something called the nipple cup, and it's a cup where she obviously doesn't have a handle because she doesn't like the look of handles. But if you don't have a handle and you're grabbing like this, you're going to burn yourself. So it's covered in nipples, like it's actually covered, and that way it's got a barrier between the heat and the heat and your hand.
Right. And it acts as a grip as well.
Yeah, and so she in the what's it called? Cup Ceramics is the studio in Hereford where she did her work. I think it's owned by a guy called Colin, and his partner. And a lot of the people there are more elderly, more traditional people, doing just very fine, delicate, contemporary and traditional ceramics. So for her to come out and just do whatever she wants. I remember taking a walk in the studio, and there were like big shelving units, racks of people's work, and you can spot hers out instantly because she just doesn't care. If she wants to do it, she'll just do it. I think I really aspire to that.
The idea of just not caring. It's like reminds me of a book called the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it's just about not really caring what other people think and just getting on with what you're doing and just cultivating you, if anything else, and sort of not necessarily telling everybody else to fuck off, but just be aware of them, but also be like, yeah, they're there.
Right.
But I'm
you don't want to be blind to everyone else in the room, but yeah, you're your own greatest asset. So
Your own worst enemy in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Moving on a little bit to inspiration and sort of staying creative. How do we? I mean, probably going to be very different for the both of you. What are ways that you stay creative, stay inspired? Is there anything that you consume or watch or do to do that process?
Inspiration is a really funny one for me. Honestly, I've never struggled with inspiration, and I am very grateful for that because a lot of people do. My assumption is it's because I quite deliberately and quite regularly expose myself to new ideas. I don't like to rely on one source for everything, because otherwise you're just kind of like in an echo chamber, and you're living out someone else's ideals and ideas, and well, that's living someone else's life. So yeah, for me, let's say you I mean, politics is the easy example, right? So it's like, whether it's a more libertarian, liberal idea, or a more authoritarian, a more conservative idea, or whatever it is. If you listen to one person express their opinions on stuff like climate change, on the labor market, on on healthcare, on whatever, if you listen to one person's opinion on that, you end up just kind of walking in the desert. So you kind of have to listen to people you disagree with as well, and that way you get a more complete picture. And that can be taken throughout anything. So if I use photography as an example, you could look at a range of different portrait photographers and how they approach just images of people, which seems simple enough, but the way they do that reframes your mind about all of it. And so if you want to create a poster for a music festival, while it's looking up music festivals, the ones you love, and you love the music, you love the design they take out, and it's looking at the festivals you would never ever go to in a different country, and you don't like the music, and you think the designer who did that wasn't very good or whatever, it's kind of exposing yourself to those new ideas. I think naturally and just organically starts to kind of cultivate in your head. For me, that's how it works anyway. Just keep it tapped into different forms of media.
That sort of brings in the idea that we were discussing earlier about knowing what you do want and knowing what you don't want. Like knowing what you want to hear because you might have a certain belief or ideal, and also knowing that you've got to consume the other half in order to understand the
you have a responsibility to do that, really. Especially, and I think that is especially true of the reasons why I fell out of love with design in my final year at university. It's you sometimes have to create a brief and create artwork for its function, and it might not look good, but if it's the best answer to solve the problem, then it's the correct answer. And you can kind of argue about the visuals around that, but the point being, like you need to make sure you get that function correct there.
I think also what comes into that a little bit is subjectiveness, and that what you've designed to answer whether it's a client brief or just a general university project or a freelance project, it's the person you're presenting it to might love it, they might hate it, you might hate it or love it, but you've got to go with what sort of way you're steered to.
Right. If the client says they want this, then they want that.
Yeah, I can understand sort of why, because it brings in the idea of sort of entrepreneurship to it, which is what I didn't really want out of design. I didn't want to be like gonna cultivate so many followers on Instagram because then I'll get work and stuff like that. I didn't want that. That wasn't
right. So you went to university to be a designer and be a creative, and you come out like a businessman and a marketer.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah,
it's definitely odd. Ross, what about yourself? How do you stay creative, inspired?
I think it comes from, and maybe it sounds a little cliche, like a whole host of things. I think it is inspiration is maybe possibly could be seen as a motivator behind an idea, and I think that comes from loads of places. That can come from a group of friends, to a book I read, to a piece of work I see on, you know, a Behance portfolio or something like that. And I think they come when you least expect it. I think it's hard to obtain. I think ideas are really difficult. That's something I really struggle with. So I'm not trying to paint a picture like, oh, you know, get inspired from this and ideas come really fluently. I don't think that's the case at all. So that's I think the most stressful thing for me is getting an idea and rolling with it. For example, like the first project I had where I am now, it was to get to that idea or to roll with that idea. It was a bit of back and forth conversation between me and my creative director. And initially, like we landed on somewhere which we thought, yeah, that's really cool. It looked really good. And then pitched it to the client, and they weren't so keen on it. We probably went a more like emotive / heartfelt route or direction, and they wanted more immediacy to the campaign. So yeah, I know that it's really I think ideas probably gone on a bit of tangent here, but idea generation I find really difficult. But yeah, inspiration, I guess, comes from everywhere.
Yeah, and to jump on that, I think in relation to what you're saying about like kind of having like a creativity block like that, I get that 100%. You know, it'd be a lie if I didn't. And that's kind of the line between inspiration and have I, you know, can I actually come up with the idea, do different things, because I'm motivated, and new ideas come to me quick. But I might have an idea for something. I might be like, boom, I've got it, here it is, present it, and then if any changes have to come about, now I might be like, I don't know, like sometimes you do fall flat in that case.
There's a flip side to that whole creative block as well. Like, so somebody, Aaron Draplin, who I think we're pretty much all aware of his work, he has a quote where he talks about creative block, and he's like, you know, a bricklayer doesn't go to work and get like brick block, and he's like, oh no, I can't lay bricks today. So if you're designing and that's your job, they're like, you shouldn't get it as well. And I guess like I can see where he's coming from.
Yeah, I think it's a bit arrogant, if I'm honest, but yeah, I do get his. Yeah,
that's true.
I do get his point. I mean, for me, a creative block is I'm creating a banner, and I've got a certain amount of restriction in terms of what the client wants. Can't do that, so it has to be, you know, for example, no color, printed black and white. You have to use this typeface and stay within the brand guidelines, etc. But we want it to kind of, you know, pop, and we want to do this and whatnot, and you know, if it's not a passion project, especially, and I'm not really sure, you know, which direction I want to start taking it, then yeah, I completely get blocked. But it's not often that happens, but when I do, I've always found that I just drop it and then come back, you know, half a day later, and then usually I'm freed up by it.
See, this is something I really struggle with, is taking breaks.
You don't?
Yeah, there is scientific research that supports the beneficial aspects that it can have to productivity and seeing an idea through and getting to it. But like in my head, especially at the minute, if I have like an hour break, I'm like, right, that's 1 hour that is closer to achieving the end goal, which is a silly way to look at it. And I agree with what you said in the past, Zach. I just have a hard time telling myself that sometimes.
Well, I think different people will find the line in different ways. For me, because I understand the importance, and I've had to experience quite a lot of times where I needed to focus on myself for once rather than the job. I get too into the job, I burn out completely, and I'm having to like relearn how to focus on myself first. So now a big emphasis on my workflow is something like I mean, I don't do a Pomodoro timer, but it's a very, very famous technique. Is work for 20 minutes, rest for 5 minutes, work for 20 minutes, rest for 5 minutes. And I found that taking those breaks, even if I don't want them, if I work for 2 hours, and I could probably do another half an hour, unless I know exactly what I want to do and it's, you know, it's going to be quick, I'll force myself to have the break. And then often just that little, you know, enough time to go down, put the kettle on, come back up, I've already got new ideas.
Yeah,
they just, you know, for me, movement and breaks are kind of synonymous with having inspiration and whatnot.
It's brought like a few examples of working for 20 minutes, stopping for 5, then coming back again. There's I think a few writers do this where they if they're in a flow state of writing, they will stop. If they are going to go take a break, they will stop themselves in the middle of a sentence so they can pick up, and when they come back, they will come and read that sentence and then be like, oh, this is where I was, which helps sort of like getting into that flow state of being creative, knowing what you need to do, taking appropriate steps, experimenting with different typefaces, different colors, different, working on whatever project you're working on. There's also sort of like, what you say about working for 20 minutes, taking a break. I don't know exactly where I got this from, but I think it was in Start With Why, Simon Sinek. He spoke about a team that had been working for an hour, then they'd break for 20 minutes, then work for another hour. So sort of similar to what you said, but because the idea with that was because they knew they were only working that hour, they were putting all their effort into those hours that they were working. And then when
it's like a little breaking competition for yourself, is how much can I do in that time frame? And that will work for some people, it won't work for others. Because if you do get into a flow state, some people want to ride that wave completely until it dies out. So if you're really motivated, you've got all the energy, and you're really inspired, you know what you want to do, and you're really into the creativity of it. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, is just to ride it for as long as you can, like Ross does. It's just a different way. Yeah, I guess if you're used to doing it one way, try the other, see what happens. Purposely interrupt your creativity. Break it up, whether you go for a 10-minute walk and come back or whatnot, or you go and make a cup of tea, have some food, then come back, see what it does to you. It might destroy your creativity, or it might improve it.
Yeah, there's an idea of just trying different techniques, right, and seeing what works, and that certain feeling of, okay, maybe I don't want to have this break, but maybe I'll come back and I'll be fresher with ideas. So it's sort of like knowing what works for you, because obviously everyone's creative process is very, very different.
Yeah, I've heard of writers going to a different cafe every day to write, just to break up the environment quite a lot.
Yeah,
I think routine is something I hate anyway. I think.
Yeah.
I think so. Routine. What's that?
Do you want to expand on that?
I guess it was more just adding something in there. I don't really know if I could expand it, but the whole idea of doing the same thing. Like, for example, at work at the minute, I guess in-house roles, or the previous two that I had, were very routine. Like, it wouldn't have added much to my portfolio, wouldn't have added much to me as designer. I wouldn't have been learning much. It would have just been a case of churning things out.
Sorry, when you say routine, do you mean like it's the same pattern every day of you have an hour meeting in the morning, if you're an hour on that project, an hour on that project, or do you mean it's like the same type of work?
Yeah, that's in the same type of work. I think more so. Like, at the minute, I've got we've got quick turnarounds. Working to those deadlines is really cool. Like, that's a motivator, I think. And I was going to say, yeah, like we've got we have a diverse range of clients, some existing, some brand new, with really interesting and weird ideas. Like, for example, we have, it's and you're just like, what? And that's refreshing. I think that makes a routine. But yeah, I didn't want to elaborate on it too much.
It's a sort of an idea, Ross, of wanting to work on different projects so you can progress in your work and your style and the way you work. Is there an ideal there, or is it just like you just don't want it to be stagnant?
Yeah, probably the latter, I think, for the time being. Some of the ideas we get in can be real naff, just as good as you can get in some that can be really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just a case of feeling stagnant. Like, for example, my previous role, we had so basically they're a distributor. They have 14 brands in their portfolio, all of which are brands that are established and have very high global presences too. So, but in each one of those brands likes to be seen in the exact same way all the time. consistently across all ranges of media. So other than sort of photography and little tweaks, there's not really much creative freedom there. You're just sort of churning stuff out and going through the motions.
It's like the text always goes here, and it's always this size.
Yeah,
and there's always going to be this many lines of sentences.
Yeah, they've like if it's out, if it strays beyond those parameters, it's no good.
I think that's actually in big part, and I know this is quite true of a lot of creative friends of mine as well, is the reason why you tend to jump from ideas and projects to projects, especially if you're freelance or even in your spare time, is you kind of, there's always this itch for a little bit more, and doing the same thing over and over again can be really, really it's not that there's not like a negative to in any sense, but a lot of creative people find that their mind wanders because they have interest in other ideas. I mean, that's a part of why I play instruments and I have photography trips, and I like to do a lot of writing on stuff like philosophy, relativism, and social science, and it's why I'm now trying painting. It's because my mind is. It's not fragmented at all in that sense. I can kind of pick and choose what I want to do creatively, but it freshens it up constantly.
That's like if I played at Saddleback, like I would have looked at maybe like a year's time, and like I said, there were great things, but I probably wouldn't have had that much to show in terms of.
Yeah, I can imagine that doing the same kind of type of design,
business type things as well. Like, so there's a lot of strategy, as well as creative things to be looked at as well, and that whole idea of brand in its like broader term, like really to learn all the things that come.
I often wonder that with illustrators who are really talented at doing different styles, but they get really famous for one project they did, and suddenly they get clients flooding in for that one style they do, and even though they could do multiple different things, one of them might be very vector minimalized, very flat, iconographic.
Well, Tobias Hall springs to mind. You say that, like, he's got such a unique style, and his list is massive because of that. Because it's like you could piece of his work and it's already recognizable.
Right, that's the thing, and I think it's almost a shame in a way that they. It's this really interesting flip side, because they're really well known for that one style, even though they can do so much more, and it's because of that one style they smash out and they're so successful, and their client list is massive, and it's guaranteed income in a sense, but the other side is they have all these other talents and other styles they could do, but don't get the joy to create with, because they have a backlog of clients who want the first idea and the first designs they did. I think that's something. If I was a musician, for example, or if I was an illustrator or a fine artist, and I was stuck to do that one style, if I could do more, I'd love to, but whatever pays, right?
I think it's like as well. Are you a master of one trade, or are you a jack of all? It's like now, like we talk in the office sometimes about like styles and certain things, and you can look at somebody's work and recognize their style or their feel or whatever. And I think, like, as the older I get, I want to discover what my style is. So I guess that's related to what you said, Zach, about the flip side of things. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right. It's funny because I already think you have a style. I know I can pick out your work. I can pick out Max's work, and you could probably pick out my work. But the interesting thing is, we know we can venture out of that style a little bit. We're trained to. It's part of the degree we did, but it'll be interesting to see, whether we focus on that or whether we drift a little bit and dabble in other things.
I think that's definitely something I want to focus on going forward. It's like, okay, well, where do I sit in all of that? Well, I guess it's like, it's so, until it's done, I think it's so hard to distinguish a style that is brand new to the world, because everything one or another.
You've either got to be so
talented,
so out there and so different. And here's the thing: is you can be so out there and so different, but it might not ever get any traction. You might be a really talented artist who is painting a style which is unlike anything before: Dadaism, Cubism, Surrealism, photorealism, impressionism, but it's nothing like anything we've ever had before. But if it doesn't get traction, it doesn't go anywhere. it's almost, that's kind of frightening in a way.
Yeah, it's like you could be that guy that comes up with this brand new idea, and the world might not be ready for it yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it might be the right time and someone finds it
Yeah,
who has the entrepreneurship to take it forward with you, or they happen to be a client big enough to get the ball rolling.
like one person starts it, everyone's like, "That's a really cool idea. That's a really cool style. We're going to do that." You know, look at Art Nouveau. You've mentioned like Dada and Cubism and that sort of thing, and all these different styles are just like being extrapolated from just one idea.
It's time, like maybe it's a bit off track, but like Gymshark, for example, they took off around the same time as social media did, and because of that reason, they went in I think it's like 8 years, they went from 500,000 in their first year to what is a $1 billion company now.
Yeah,
Right, and a big part of that is they utilize the tools they had at the time.
Yeah, they utilized it. It was an idea that everyone could get behind.
Yeah, they knew.
A whole host of factors played that, but it was at some point it was like, right, this is the perfect timing.
It's capitalizing on the tools available you have.
For sure. I remember one of the on LinkedIn, I think it was Ben Francis who started it. Is that his name? I think that's correct. Who was like this, like how it started versus how it's going. And the how it started one is a picture of just a load of cardboard boxes in what looks to be like some sort of 1-bedroom flat. And then how it's going is the picture of the Gymshark HQ with like the whole team outside. It's like showing that comparison between this is where we started, here we are now, like, but don't think of it as like it just happened overnight, because this is an 8-year process.
It was he probably feels the same to him. It's only looking back that you see that big long distance.
Yeah. I think also think about how many other sportswear brands were just starting out at around the same time, but it was that brand which got the attention.
Yeah,
it was that brand got taken forward. For example, right now they've got the I forget the word for it, that literacy award. It's getting voted on very, very soon. So a myriad of fantastic books, but one of those is going to win and become a bestseller. The others, the top 5 might also become bestsellers, but all the other fantastic books nominated might only a few might ever read them.
Yeah,
it's a curse of creativity. It can go so well, or not.
Yeah. So sort of, I've got probably like 2 more questions that I want to ask, and then we'll probably end it. So obviously we've just spoken about Gymshark and the opportunity that they had, and how that's grown over so many years. There's obviously going to be a few experiences in there that if we were to ask someone at Gymshark what was their favorite experience in growing that company, what would it be? So my question to you guys is, what's your favorite experience for being a creative?
You go first, Ross.
Oh man, I have no idea.
Same.
What was that?
It's the same.
Oh mate, mine was finding an agency that ticked. That's probably a better way of wording this. I guess finding an agency that ticks current values and has all the necessary tools to deliver to future ones as well. Like I think, like we said, having gone through those few agencies, and we're like, right, well, I really don't want to end up in an agency like this, and I really don't want to do this. But then where I'm at now is like, oh, well, this is the exact type of agency I want to be in. So I guess my best opportunity best experience is getting that foot in the door and being given that opportunity to learn those skills that will develop hopefully a pretty cool career. Fingers crossed. So.
Right, for me, it's split between 2 really. One of them would have been going to university, coming out with a first-class honours, but still deciding that maybe this isn't exactly where I want to be heading. It sounds kind of like like a paradox really, but I had to go through the experience to articulate really in my own head what I want to do and who I want to be. it was that dissatisfaction I had towards the end, which led me to find all sorts of things, my kind of altruistic values, my interests in areas like neuroplasticity and psychology, which is something I might one day pursue. It's all of my newfound passions, which I got through that not negative experience, but that kind of somewhat dissatisfaction at university. So it's split between that, and there's not a better feeling, and you guys will probably agree, when you send off your first draft to the client and there's no changes, and it comes back and they're like perfect. Oh, take me back.
Maybe one.
Yeah, it's happened twice for me.
Once or twice has it happened. I'm like,
yeah, but when all the cogs fall into the right place.
I think, well, for me, I spoke about it last time. It is Degree Show. I speak about that so often and so fondly. And
you absolutely love Degree Show.
Good times.
It was a good time. If you want to hear me spiel about that, you can. I can link into a podcast down below. I've spoken about it on like one or two podcasts. So yeah. So I guess my final question for you guys is obviously, as creators want to stay together and learn from each other. I don't know if you've got any a book to share, maybe a podcast, a film, or something of interest that other creatives might want to read. If you want to share anything with that, just go ahead and share it.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Wait, I've got mine in my.
Okay, while he gets his, I go for mine. Book is Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yep.
Very easy to read. Now straight to the point. We all have these ideas of what we want to. I want to exercise every day. I want to meditate. I want to drink more water. We have these ideas. I want to stop smoking, or I want to stop eating that food. We all have these ideas of what we want to do, but the reality is, building habits is really difficult. And that book is very simple. This is the science of how you do it. Very easy to read. Podcast. I'm going to go with Invisibilia.
So many to choose from.
So many. Probably Invisibilia. They don't upload frequently at all, but it kind of fuses narrative storytelling with science that kind of makes you see life a little bit differently. I finish a lot of the podcast being like, wow, okay. So yeah, those two for sure.
Right, I want to find a podcast. I know the podcast I want.
Okay.
I'll find the name of it.
That's fine. I'm going to grab my recommendation for this week as well.
Yeah, I'll get mine then.
I think you're just picking at random ones because I've mentioned it in the podcast like twice. So Ross, while you find that podcast, I'm going to recommend Start With Why by Simon Sinek. So why great brands start with why leaders start with why, and how they inspire their team to be better as a whole is pretty much the logistics of that. Great book, some great ideas in there, and some like new ways of thinking and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's that.
There's the book cover for the book I mentioned.
Available on all good retail places.
Wherever you get your books.
Wherever you get your books from. Ross, have you found that podcast?
Yeah, so my first book is probably linked more to creativity than my podcast. The Brand Gap.
Um,
Great book. Love it.
What's that?
It's a great book. I love it.
It's brilliant. Like, and he does a few as well. There's called there's one called Zag, and there's another one called The Brand.
Right.
Well, he does quite a few. But those are, I suppose, me. I could read that like once every week and pick up something new.
Right.
It's basically like a short summary is how to bridge the distance between business strategy and design. I think you really want, like, people always say, oh, you're never going to make a living out of creative stuff. It seems like a bit of a myth to a lot of people. I think that helps in a lot of ways, because it like it says, it bridges the gap between business design and business and design. So to sell a product that's got some really insightful stuff that certainly helped me. Interesting. It's got a lot of cool things in there I wasn't really aware of. But yeah, that's pretty good. And then another one, the podcast is I wouldn't really say I listen to podcasts probably as frequently as you boys, but what I did listen to is it's actually from a mountain biker called the Matt McDuff Show, and it's called Unexplained Reoccurring Injuries, Neurological Programming, Instant Transformations, and much more with Don Smith. Basically, to give you an overview, Matt sits down with Don Smith. For over 40 years, Don has specialized in instant transformations, helping others uncover their inner greatness, including top-ranked professional sports franchises and Olympic athletes. Don leaves us with many invaluable takeaways and covers many topics and must listen. And I just find that mind-blowing. Like, he talks about, so he helps a lot of NFL teams, and there are some players that aren't performing then these real slumps, and you've got to listen to it to experience it. When I heard, I thought, I was like, no, this is impossible. Like, you're pulling my leg. And he talked about these neurological transformations, and that they happen in a second. And give it a listen and see what you think. But it blew my head off, and that was really, really cool. Awesome. So yeah, that one really had me engaged, more so than anything else I've listened to. So.
Yeah, that's great. Something to bring up about the brand gap as well. I think in the first bit where he sort of like introduces himself and what he wants to do with the book is that at the end he was like, you can read this in a short plane ride. So it's like an idea of like a bite-sized book that you can just pick up, get some like a huge ton of value from, and then get on with the rest of your life. He says like something like your time is valuable, and this book aims to do that, or something like that.
It's written in a really weird way. Like, it's not, you know how you pick up a book and it'd be like all like it'd be like serif typeface, and it'd be like small text. Like, this is really quite big.
Yeah.
Like, do you see what I mean? So it's you can
you and your terrible eyesight works really well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like you can skim through a big chunk in sort of 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah, I like it.
I mean, I think it's called like a whiteboard overview, right? So for me, like when I picked that book up for the first time, I was like, oh, it's like it's being written on a whiteboard on every page, almost. Like, this is what you need to know. This is like an illustration. This is the graphic I'm going to show you. This is how brand works, and that sort of thing. So yeah, Zach and Ross, thank you very much for joining me today for this Creative Corner episode 2. So yeah, for those of you that don't know, Creative Corner is hosted by LifeProof, which is at LifeProof UK across all social media accounts. Thanks for listening. Let us know what you guys think in the comments, and that's about what we've discussed today. Always feel free to drop us a DM or an email or whatever it is that you want to contact us on. I will also link Zach and Ross both down in the description about what they do and where you can find them. But other than that, thank you for listening, guys, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Bye, folks.